All right. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome. My name is Elizabeth Siri. I'm the Executive Director of Communications and Development at Foundations, Inc. And I'd like to welcome you to another one of our Beyond School Hours webinar series. You might already know us from Beyond School Hours, which is our National Education Conference. We are going to be in Orlando from February 9th through the 12th, and we would like you all to be our guests. So please consider joining us. The room block is filling up, so we'll make sure that we put that information in the chat for you today. Foundations, Inc. is a national education nonprofit. We're located in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, and our mission is to improve the quality of education by strengthening the skills of educators. So we work across the school day with after-school programs in schools, districts, and even at the state level to create a brighter future for every child every day. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Foundations, I'll put our website in the chat, or you can follow us on social media. And today we have Hillary Jones, who is an education specialist at Foundations, Inc. And she's going to introduce you to a menu of techniques that come from education, organizational leadership, and human resources fields that really support OST leaders in the implementation of high quality program. So thanks for joining us, Hillary.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for having me. In our webinar today, as Elizabeth said, we're going to look at 12 no or low cost techniques that good leaders can use to engage both students or staff. And some of these are things that you may be doing, others you may not be, but my hope today is that you can find one or two that will help you improve your practice as a leader, that will help you deal with the engagement of your staff. So as Elizabeth said, my name is Hillary Jones, and I'm an education specialist for Foundations, Inc. And I was a school day teacher and then went on to run out of school time programs for 8 years. And I, in that time, found that I made a whole lot of mistakes. I probably made every mistake. I came to that role knowing how to run a classroom, but not necessarily what it looked like to really be a good leader, especially over adults and what that looked like. And so I made some mistakes along the way for sure. And I'm hoping that some of the things that I can share with you today help you not make those same mistakes, help you become a good leader. And we will go a little bit from there, but I'd love to have you start by introducing yourselves in the chat and letting us know, are you somebody who leads staff or students or both in your role? And so introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about where you're from as we get going today. But throughout our session, you all should be experts by now on Zoom, but we will be using our annotation tool, which you can find right above the green tool that says you are viewing Hillary Jones's screen. And grab those tools as we go through. We'll also use some reactions and the chat box, of course. And so as we get going, just jump in, use those things. This is designed to be interactive, to create some space for you to be reflective and to engage in conversation around these practices with others who are here who are wanting to be good leaders for your staff. So as we get rolling, I want you to think about, what does engagement mean? We want to have more engaged people in our programs, whether they're students, whether they're staff, and you're likely choosing to attend this session because you're experiencing some kind of low engagement. So think about it. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel that helps you know your students and your staff are experiencing low engagement? So I'd love for you to share that in the chat box, what that is, that you say, this is what engagement would look like, or what engagement doesn't look like. So you've got a couple of assignments, you're introducing yourselves, which I love to see, and then what does engagement look like, sound like, feel like for you in your space, in your context. I'll share a little bit about my experience as you guys write in the chat, but I ran youth programs, as I said. And in my program, sometimes my teens would be the ones who would struggle to stay engaged. A lot of them were in those emerging leadership roles, junior counselors, and those types of responsibilities. And I would say to them, I need you to engage in what I'm doing. And I needed to be very specific with them about what engagement looked like. So I would say to them, Engagement for me means that you're close enough that you can reach out and touch a student, one of the younger kids that they were supposed to be working with, and that you're either doing what an adult leader told you to do, leading an activity, or doing the activity with the students. And so for my teens, that was something that helped them clearly understand what engagement looked like, sounded like, or felt like in our program. But I'd love to hear from some of you. What does engagement look like, sound like, feel like for you? I see somebody that said that it is everyone doing something that interests them and that they feel good about what they're doing. And I would absolutely agree with that. It can mean actively participating for sure, which can look different in anybody that we interact with. Active participation for you may be different than what active participation looks like for me. You may have the student in your classroom who needs to be standing up or have something in their hands to do so that they can actively participate, while others can actively participate by listening or watching what's happening in the class. I have an answer here that says it's a two-way interaction. It looks like one person talking and the other one listening in a safe environment for both. I like the answer that says it's usually a bit noisy too. A good noisy though. And I appreciate that, because I do think a lot of times engagement has to be a little noisy. We'd be happy with some active participation, a little enthusiasm from staff and students. That's an okay place to be. You're in the right spot for today. So it can look like a lot of things. And that's the thing about engagement, is it's not going to look the same for everybody. But for our context and for our conversation today, I'm going to say this, that engagement is when people are involved in responsible, interactive actions that contribute to, teach, and learn from one another. And that can go both ways. That can be students where they're contributing to teaching and learning, and where the adults are doing the same thing. And so it's something that is hands-on, that it's interactive, and it looks like a wide variety of things. It can be being on task, it can be talking, it can be noisy, but it can be quiet. It can be other things, as long as we're teaching from and learning from one another. So the question is then, why do staff and our students disengage? And there's really a wide variety of reasons that they disengage. And this isn't necessarily a complete list, but I want to get you thinking about a few things, because as you look at techniques for engagement, we need to identify ones that best match with the needs of our students and our staff. And that will vary based on your specific context. So some things to think about are, one, the lack of purpose or meaning. It's when people feel disconnected from the work, when they're doing something that feels meaningless or doesn't seem to have any value to them. The second reason would be a loss of trust. Another reason that students and staff disengage is this loss of trust, when they don't believe or experience support from their leaders, where they feel like they're alone. And as a result, they're going to disengage from the organization. And then the last one is a lack of connection, when they don't feel connected to the program, to the classroom, to the group. Especially in the workplace, this can seem like something that's unimportant or not worth spending time on, but it really truly can be a key to staying engaged instead of just completing tasks. And so I hope you're starting to think about these a little bit. Say, I wonder which one my students or my staff are experiencing as I'm experiencing that disengagement. So let's talk about some techniques for engagement. And as we begin, it's important to recognize that these are not one-time solutions, that you can't go and take technique number 1 and do it today, and technique number 2 and do it tomorrow, and and work your way through technique number 12 and therefore have solved your engagement problem. Instead, you need to pick a few, 1 or 2 likely, and do it over and over in order to rebuild that trust that's been broken, rebuild that meaning, and rebuild that connection. Just as students and staff disengage over time, it's going to take time to re-engage them. So let's look at the first one. The first one is to draw on our skills and draw on the skills of those around us. We are learning all the time. We're learning from family, from friends, from others in our lives. We learn formally in school, our students in our programs, as adults at work. We also learn naturally in life through our experiences, surroundings, and This type of learning is largely incidental. Sometimes students learn things that we wish they didn't. Ever had a young student come in using bad word that they heard and didn't really know what it means? That's a natural approach to learning, but we can use that for good things too. Each staff member in your program has something of value to offer. This can be their knowledge and skills. It can be a hobby. It can be something of their culture, their knowledge of your community. They also have work experience and skills. If you work in out of school time, you know that people come from diverse backgrounds, that they may be previous teachers, they may be administrators or something else. They could be social workers, whatever it may be. Those diverse backgrounds and experiences can be used in your program to bring another perspective on it. Your staff, your students, they're also resources. They have individual connections. It could be in the community or with their families. And you can use that as a resource. And the finally is their personal style. This includes the way our staff, our students are, what they like to do, the things they want to learn, or to help youth learn if you're talking about adults. And engaging these can help increase the engagement and connection that people feel with your program in school. So think for yourself, what unique skills do you bring to your organization? What are the things that you have that are of value that you bring? I work in an organization where we work with a lot of people in a lot of schools. And my secret skill is I speak Spanish. And sometimes I get to use that in my organization, in my work, where I can communicate with people who I might not have the open door to if I didn't. I was at a training last week where I was working with a paraeducator who really needed a little bit of context in Spanish because of her understanding of what we were talking about. And so that's a unique skill that I bring. As you think about your own skills, think about your staff too. What skills do they have? What things could they bring to the table that you're not capitalizing on? And so I would encourage you to get to know your staff a little bit, find out what those things are, and rely on them as you do. One of the things that we can offer to you is in this handout that I'm dropping in the chat box, is a document called Your Resources. Maybe you need to ask your staff what their skills are. Maybe you need to find out from them what they're good at, what they do. You may not know who knows how to knit or who is an amazing Lego builder because it's outside of what we think is the context for someone's job. But the reality is you'll find that those skills can be used for amazing things. I had a staff member who I learned was way into music and had some significant skills around music. And we ended up creating a whole drumming activity club that involved math skills because she had that music background. She had those skills. And that's not the thing that you should now go and run into your program to engage staff, but instead finding out what they know, what they can do can be a tool to use to increase that engagement. Okay, that's number one. Ready for number two? Here we go. So number two is we need to listen. And you're going to say, well, that's obvious. I knew that. I didn't come to this webinar for you to tell me to listen more. But most of us do. We can get busy with our work, with the tasks that we need to do, with our email, and we really need to make time to listen to what our staff or our students are saying. And once they start talking, we need to really pay attention to what's being said, their verbal and nonverbal communication, their emotions, by asking those open-ended questions, simple ones, just like, can you tell me more? Really creating that space and time for that. And so that one is one of the easier ones, but some of us in all of the work that we have to do aren't making time to do that with those that we lead. So let's look at a few challenges you face. And what I'm going to ask you to do is think about this challenge, and then in the chat box, share something that you could do to address this problem. So the first one is participants, this could be staff, this could be students, don't contribute or are hesitant to contribute to a discussion. What are you going to do? How do you increase that communication and even give yourself a chance to listen? Any ideas? I see some fingers typing. So why fingers are typing? Oh, giving time to process. I think that's a huge one. Absolutely. Specific questions, specific people. Personal examples get you started. Yep, absolutely. Calling on individuals, all kinds of things. You may want to consider whether you want to force people or put them on the spot to respond. Perhaps asking in smaller groups, right? Providing opportunity for pair share, those kinds of things, and checking to see why they're hesitant to share, like Alicia said there. Let's look at another one. What if your students, your staff, are making vague statements when you ask them questions about what's really going on? You're trying to listen. What can you do to help get more clarity about what's really going on? I think that this was for the last question, but what if you have them write down what another person said and read them aloud, pass them around so that nobody knows who's really making the statements? Asking people how they're going to expand on that for clarifications, for an example. Examples go so far in helping you understand what our young people, what our staff are really expressing, what they're really trying to experience. One more, two more. What happens if participants are becoming tense or argumentative as you're trying to have this conversation? As you're trying to really frame out what's happening, as you're trying to listen to what's going on. Take a pulse, give a break. You may need to do that. You may need to say, hey, this is not the time to do that right now. Letting people reset, right? Taking a step back, acknowledging the contributions of one, and then on the other side, inviting others to respond, setting clear expectations are all part of that. And all of that really has to do with listening. It really all has to do with creating that space. One more. One person dominates the conversation. What are you going to do? How are you going to create space to make sure that you're really listening well, that you're listening broadly? Anybody ever used the talking stick? Oh, one person asks a question, everybody has a chance, asking for other opinions. A working agreement, and for sure, setting up a working agreement about how to communicate is an important part of that process, or giving everybody an opportunity to write a response down. All of those create space for listening. All of those are ways that we can encourage our staff, our students to engage through our listening. But if we listen alone and don't follow up, we've ignored any feedback that we have gotten, as hard as it may be to get that information. And in fact, we've probably increased the disengagement. And so if you're going to take time and ask questions and want to hear what's happening, you need to make sure that you create this space to follow up with this. We have to take time to hear that input and really understand it, and then do something with it. So I encourage you, if you're like, well, how do I follow up? I heard all of this information from my staff or from my students when I asked them what's really happening. I would encourage you to do a couple things. The first is, as you listen, ask yourself, what's my reaction, my personal reaction to what they said? Did I start feeling defensive? Did I feel like, no, I'm not doing that? That's not what our program's like. But wait, we're not like that. If that's your reaction, this is the time to become aware of it. Or if your reaction is, but I can't do anything about that. Whatever it is, pay attention to that. Then consider, how is this relevant to my work? Sometimes we get feedback on things, we get responses from our staff, from our students on things that are outside of what's relevant to what we're supposed to be doing, what we're supposed to be leading, and where our responsibilities lie. And so that's the last piece, is how am I going to use this in my work? What am I going to do about it? This, going through this process of what sometimes I like to call the 3 R's, is something that helps us let go of our own emotions and identify real actions that we can take based on that feedback and follow through as we communicate with others in our organization, and that we follow up, that we continue to go on and move forward with that listening that we did. We really need to make the time and the space for that. Here comes number 4. Number 4 may seem obvious given number 3, but how many times do you get asked to do something and you get busy? It's important for us as leaders to do the things that we say that we're going to do, even the little things. That includes coming to look at a student's picture. It includes bringing a staff member crayons, even though they know where to find them and they could get them themselves. It includes both the little things and the big things, supporting that building trust and improving relationships. So do you say, I'll be right back, and never make it back to that classroom or that activity? Do you say to a student, we can do that tomorrow, and then it doesn't happen for a week or at all? It is better for us as leaders to say, no, I can't do that right now, than say yes and for us not to do it. So in being reflective, I want you to grab your annotation tool, and I want you to take a moment and think about yourself as a leader and say, hey, am I somebody who rarely keeps my promises? I get busy, I forget, and there's just so much going on and I never get back to that. I sometimes do, but it can get hectic and I don't always get there. Mostly I do it. Mostly I do what I say I'm going to do, even in the little things. And then sometimes I lose track of what I said I'd do. And then if you're somebody who always does it, just that's a skill I've nailed. And so I'd ask you to grab your annotation tool, tell us how you do at this, let us know. And then for some of you who are thinking about this a little bit, write in the chat box, what are some barriers that you have to keeping your promises? What are the things that keep you from actually doing the things that you said you're going to do? I'll tell you for myself, when I was running programs, I would walk through programs at spaces, and you're talking hundreds and hundreds of kids, and I typically had like 50 to 80 staff on my team. And so people would ask me to do things in the hall all the time, and I wouldn't always do it. And I started sending myself emails right then and there when people asked me to do things. And when I went back to my desk, I would try and do it then. But keeping that list on my phone was something that worked for me. And it was something that I always had access to. We've got a little mixed group here. We've got some who say sometimes, some who say mostly I do it, but sometimes I lose track. And a bunch of you who've said, yes, always. This is something that I've nailed. So A+. This is something that you've nailed. Do you have something that works for you? Are you sending yourself those emails so that you make sure that you do it? Are you using a little checklist or a notepad to keep track of those things? But what are the things that you're doing to help you keep your promises? And if not, what are those barriers? What are the things that are challenges for you? And so it's important, make sure you're taking the time, you reflect on that. That you keep your promises even in the little things, because it does make a difference in our staff engagement, in our student engagement. If you're somebody who's, well, I'll hold that. I'm going to come up to that one. So let's keep going. Next one, number 5, communicate well. So this includes a few considerations. Are you sure? Are you as a leader in the place where your communication is accessible to everyone? Is everyone getting the message that they need to? Do you need to use multiple platforms? What platforms are most accessible to your students, to your families, to your staff? Are your messages understandable? Is it in simple language that everybody can use? Are you using a lot of jargon that maybe your adults aren't familiar with? Or are you talking over the heads of your youngest students so that the older ones aren't bored? All of those are things to take into consideration as you're talking about what it really means to be a good communicator. Is your message timely? What is happening at or around that time? So are you telling staff that you need to start spending on materials at the same time you're making a big purchase, such as replacing the basketball court? Like those kinds of things we need to think about as we communicate. Is your communication early enough so that staff can plan? Are you telling your staff things with a lot of notice? If your staff are going to be off for a week over the holiday season, do they know that now? Are they aware and not counting on the pay if they don't have paid time off or those kinds of things? It's important to be timely in our communication. Be transparent. Don't hide from staff your funding challenges. Don't hide from students things such as staff turnover, changes in plans, and why they're happening. Instead, share them openly with an appropriate level of detail, which an appropriate level of detail isn't always all the details, but be clear with them so that students trust you and understand your actions. And then be aware of just other messages you send. As you communicate, be aware that if you're nervous or stressed, those staff, those students who know you, who understand you, that's going to come across in your body language and your tone and how you communicate. And so that is also an important piece. Here comes number 6. We're almost halfway through. Provide meaningful opportunities. Both staff and students want to make connections to real life experiences and they want to make a difference. And oftentimes we think about this with students, we're pretty good at it. We do project-based learning, we do service learning, we maybe have maker spaces, or civic learning. But it's also important to do this with our staff. As they have opportunities to make an impact on students, they need to see that our students are making progress and feel like they are giving their time, their energy to something that's valuable, that they're making a difference in society. And so if we're not helping make those connections for our staff, that the work that they're doing is meaningful, then we're missing something that helps them stay engaged. So we've talked about the first 6 techniques, and I want you to get your annotation tool ready. Think about what techniques you might use to address this scenario. And you can mark those 6 techniques as they go down the right-hand side of your screen with your annotation tool. So your staff are putting on movies at least once a week. They say they don't know what else to do. And you don't want students watching so many movies. So what techniques could you use to help increase engagement? What things could you do to say, hey, we're going to make this a more valuable time for our students and our staff? I've got some draw-on skills. Absolutely. Is it time to start knitting club or a woodworking class or something else where our staff are using skills that they already have? Are we providing meaningful opportunities? That's another one that we've got. Yes. Are we creating places for everybody to connect to see what the value is in what they're doing? Or is it just babysitting and that's how they see it? Are you following up with staff, listening to them and following up with staff about what's happening? You may find that they don't have the resources that they need. They don't have the things that they need to do the next thing. And so making sure that you take the time to ask questions and that you follow up on that feedback that you're receiving is an important part of the process. Really, almost all of these could be used. We don't have anything in here about promises, but all of the others fit in this context and could help you as you start to address what we need to do to increase that engagement in our staff and our students. So that's half of our techniques. Hopefully you found a couple that you're starting to see that might work for you. But one of the things that I'll encourage you to think about is, what is a technique that maybe you think, well, my staff need to do more of this? And if you're thinking like that, I would encourage you, take a moment and take off your judger hat. Our staff do probably need to do more of whatever it is. They need to be better listeners. They need to keep the promises. They need to do all those things. But if you're in this position of leadership, I would encourage you to say, I'm going to do it first. I'm going to model this for my staff as a leader. This is who I want to be. Let's keep going. We've got number 7. So number 7 is recognize proudly and loudly. So often as leaders, we spend a lot of time managing, and we forget to celebrate the achievements and acknowledge that our students and our staff, they're making an impact on our organizations, on our programs, on our schools, on our space. And so I would ask you, how are you celebrating your students or staff? Feel free to share ways you do that in the chat box. We'd love to hear somebody else who may need another idea. One of the things I've done in my program is we've used shout outs with both students and staff. It gives me an opportunity to acknowledge them and for them to acknowledge one another, which can be really valuable. I've especially done this with older students. They can get really into it, kind of surprisingly. And it's been something that's really valuable in our programs and in our space. I visited a school this fall where they have an eagle mascot. And so they had a board posted for staff to write about staff they saw soaring, and they could write post-its and like post them up on the board, went with their school mascot. That's a great way to do that. But think for yourself, how are you currently celebrating your students and staff? It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. It can be something little, but it's so important to increasing engagement as you do that. And so I'd love to hear ways that you're already doing that, that you're acknowledging how your staff, how your students grow. We have survey results that you're sharing with your staff, school principals, and giving shout outs. That's a great way to do that. I have another program that I visited this fall where they talk about their grows and their glows. And their grows are things that they need to work on, and their glows are things that they're doing really well. Certificates are always a win. They're so cheap. Print them out on your printer, and people feel really good about them. Photos are a great way. Staff of the month, youth of the month, all of those are ways that you guys are recognizing student proudly and loudly. And if your program is not doing that, maybe there's something there in that collection of ideas that you should be considering, that you should include in what you're doing. The next one is be a resource. I will say this: if you're somebody who says, I always do what I promise, what I have learned in talking to people is, oh, I always do what I promise, because most of the time I say, no, I can't do that. For your staff and for your students to grow, they need resources that you, the leader, can provide. And so a couple of these resources can be being present. Your presence is a resource. We can be guilty of, especially those of you who are in administrative leadership roles, going to work in our office, at our desk, instead of being available in the program to answer questions that students or staff may have, or provide supplies, provide resources that they need, making sure that they have both physical resources and supplies, but they may also need from us ideas, inspiration, guidance, modeling, and feedback. And us as a resource, our role as a leader is to provide that for our staff and for our students. And so as you think about the resources and whether you're a resource for your staff and students, my question for you is, what are the things, resources that you get asked for most frequently? What questions do your staff and students ask more frequently? What resources do they need? Share a couple ideas in the chat. What are the things that staff ask you for? I will tell you that when I was a program leader, I had a shocking number of requests for things that were just in closets in other classrooms. It was amazing to me. And as much as I could have said, no, you were supposed to get that during your prep time, you were supposed to get that before you came into your activity, it was much more effective for me, for the students and the learning in my program to say, yeah, I'll get that for you. And guess what? That helped create an openness in my classrooms, in my space, because staff didn't necessarily feel like, hey, she's always coming in to check on me and tell me what I'm doing wrong. But sometimes she's coming in to check on me and just seeing if she can support me in any way. So what are the resources you're getting asked for? What are they? Just generally. Is it ideas? Incentives? Oh, every program needs some incentives. And that's a real thing, right? Having just the things to give away to the kids. Sometimes it's ideas, right? Sometimes it's just like, hey, I don't know what to do about this. And because you're present, because you're creating that space where you're engaging your staff, those ideas come out. Maybe it's training and just helping provide that connection between here's where I'm stuck or I'm struggling and making that training. Whatever those resources are, work and think about ways that you can help supply those resources to your staff. Not every training means I'm sending my staff out of the building for a whole day that I don't have enough staffing to cover all those things. There's all kinds of creative ways to do training. It can be 5-minute meetings. It can be you going in a room and modeling something that you want to teach them, right? There's all kinds of ways that training can occur and not necessarily be a barrier. So if you're not being asked for resources, I would encourage you work on being more present. And if you are, can you provide more resources to staff or students? And so I'd encourage you to just think about all those things as you work your way through what things you're going to do. Number 9, we're partway through. So number 9 is to serve. So servant leadership is one model that gets talked about in models for leadership, and not necessarily the only one or the best, but an aspect of servant leadership is that servant leaders support staff and students in their care. They ask, how can I help? And they help meet those needs. They explain why they say what they do, and they clarify why something's true. They say, what do you think? And give students or staff the opportunity to think for themselves and share their own ideas. And so I would encourage you, if you haven't taken the time to spend some time in your space, to spend some time in a classroom, even if you're in an administrative role, even if you're in a leadership role, I would encourage you to, because you find out a lot when you spend those time in those places. You build those connections, those bridges, and you increase engagement in those ways. I will say to you that when staff don't see you as accessible, when students don't see you as accessible, then they're going to be less likely to bring those challenges to you. But when you're present, it is much easier for them to create that space to bring those challenges, bring those things to you. Number 10, get social. So you may have heard this proverb of all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy before, and there's some truth to it. There need to be opportunities for social interaction in the workplace and in youth programs. It can support intrinsic motivation, it can reduce stress, and it's important not to skip team building or celebrations. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can be a potluck and can be just as valuable as some fancy catered meal. And it's important for our students too. They need to build positive adult relationships and relationships with peers. And this may be done informally during arrival, dismissal, and meals when the adults are engaging with the students, but they need to opportunities for celebrations in order to build community and to build that engagement. And so I would encourage you, don't skip out on this something social. In fact, our staff, our team at Foundations yesterday had a lot of fun doing a murder mystery challenge. We really did have a blast, but it was something social that is valuable to your organization's culture, to your climate. So here's your challenge. What are some social activities that you can do that'll cost you less than $10 and can be done in less than 10 minutes? Think about it and throw it in the chat box. Why people are thinking about that, Lisette, we will be sharing information will get sent out after the webinar, including a recording, so you can go back, grab the things that you're interested in out of that. We've got fun Fridays and duty-free lunch or breaks. Oh, duty-free lunch or breaks for our staff when they are overworked. Man, if that means you're going to go in and sub for them, do that. It's like getting two things out of one. Breakfast with staff, some community builders, right? Those team building activities, they are really valuable. As much as some of us, and I'm one of them, we roll our eyes at them and we're like, man, why do we have to do this like team building thing? They really do create some value around them. And so creating that space, creating those things, some treats or donuts, depending on the size of your team, you might be able to do for less than $10. If you're somebody who had programs like me where you've got 40, 50, 60 plus people on your team, you probably can't do that for $10. But it's worth it to sing happy birthday for somebody's birthday and let everybody sign a card or a poster that you printed out. It's worth it to take a little bit of time to do those things, to recognize people from your team and recognize your students. And you can spend more than 10 minutes on some of these things, on that team building, on visits, on a breakfast, but you can also do them quick, right? None of these things have to take a long time. Sneaking into the break room to grab donuts because you know they're there doesn't take that long from our team. And it's worth it for the social aspect of what happens in the break room, what happens when you get a lucky cookie and share a success with the team. Right? All of those are valuable ways, social ways that we make an impact on our staff engagement because they feel cared about. They feel like there's something that they're connected with. And remember, we said that engagement is that breaking of connection. And so that's one way that we can help rebuild that. Let's look at number 11. Number 11 is focusing on community care. We know we should, and we probably want our students and staff to practice more what we typically talk about as self-care. But there's things that we, the leaders, can do to create what I'm going to call a community of care. We can help support the people around us. We can use boundaries to do this when we work during work hours and we expect our staff to work during work hours, but we resist sending the emails or doing the other work outside of work hours and expect staff to do the same. That's one way that we create a community of care. Giving the gift of time, right? Give your students and staff time when they need it. You might have a staff member who needs to step out of the classroom for 5 minutes, or a student who needs the same to deal with emergency, maybe something that's going on at home, or just to breathe. Offer them that time. Say, hey, if you need to step out, if you're having that moment, know that if you let me know, I'll come step into your classroom and cover that. Or you can always have that moment to step out of the class. Whatever it looks like for you and for your students, for your contacts, we know it's one more thing to do. All of these things are one more things to do. But the reality is when we do the one more things for our team, we increase their effectiveness, and over time we increase student learning and we reduce some of our other. The last one is cooperation. It's a culture in which you support one another by working together. When you give cooperation to staff, when you cooperate and work together, you increase that engagement. And when you do tasks together, it makes everybody's job a little bit easier, right? It could be by saying, hey, we have to clean up this disaster from this event that we had. Let's all do it. Let's take the time and work together for 10 minutes and get it done, instead of the person who's the event planner having to spend the next hour cleaning up by themselves, right? Those kinds of things where we say, as a team, as a community, we're going to do this thing together makes a huge difference. Marcia said in the chat box, using grade level teams to cover another's class for 10 minutes. Those little breaks, those little times of checking in and caring about one another, they make a difference. And it makes your staff feel supported, cared about, and they build that trust in ourselves. Here's number 12. offer leadership development. We plan for our students to learn and our programs and schools to improve their overall performance. But sometimes we fail to offer the opportunity for leadership development in order to make that happen. And when I'm talking about leadership development, I'm talking about something that goes beyond teaching instructional skills to our staff. Evidence shows that leadership development increases staff engagement because individuals better understand the organization's design, the quality, the impact, and indicators for success. And so this kind of support can help organizations grow. It can help raise up future program leaders. And it's really something that we need to create this space and we need to create the time for in our programs. It doesn't have to look necessarily one way. It doesn't mean that I, again, send you off to a training for a week. It could just mean an opportunity for a leader who has less experience to do something that maybe is a little bit of a challenge for them. It may mean that you offer your teams an opportunity to do something with younger students. It may mean that you offer families an opportunity to invest in the program and do some kind of activity with the young people. Those things look like a variety of ways to offer leadership development, and it could be student leadership support, but leaders are more likely to see themselves as integral and necessary, even in their limited role. And so thereby offering that leadership development, we're increasing that engagement. And you all are sitting in something that's leadership development associated, but are you able to offer those opportunities to your staff, to your students? Let them run something. You would be amazed. I would have teams that worked in my program, and on days when school was closed, we would have like camp style days, and we would let the teens plan and run all the activities that day. You would be amazed at what happened. And they felt like they were in charge of the whole thing because the adults took a step back and they were given that chance to grow. And it wasn't something that always looked beautiful. It sometimes looked really messy because they're teens and they didn't realize that they needed these 3 things to make the project actually work and happen. But it increased their engagement, it increased their growth. And some of those teens grew to become full-time staff in our programs, grew into those leadership positions because we offered time and development of them, because we supported their growth. And so finding little ways to do that among your team could look like seeing a teacher or another staff member who has a little bit more training and skills and spending the day with them, shadowing them, checking out what they do. All of those are ways that you can support that engagement in those leaders. So let's do a quick check-in. So you're going to get your annotation tool ready. And again, we're going to look at these last 6 techniques and think about what you might do to address this scenario. So the scenario is your staff are grumpy. They grumble about their daily work and are doing the bare minimum. Oh, I saw somebody say that at the beginning. So what are some techniques that you might use? Grab your annotation tool, mark them down, and how would you use them? Some leadership development opportunities? Absolutely. And I will say, sometimes it's really hard to offer those leadership development opportunities to the staff that you're like, man, they're grumbling and barely doing the bare minimum. I've been in that spot. But you'll be surprised at what you get when you treat them like they're the leader. You'll start to see them come out and say, well, I could do a little bit more. I could take the next step. Focusing on that community care, maybe it's really burnout. Maybe it's just they're broken. It's been a hard season. They're in that spot. Recognizing loudly, proudly, man, giving some cheer, giving some encouragement goes a long way. And being a resource to them. You could do something social with them, right? You could have a little party, a little celebration, something to look forward to. and then serve. Creating all those spaces. So really all of these things are things that you could do depending on your context, depending on your staff. You could do all of these things to help create that space where your staff feel like they're cared about, where they're known, where they're encouraged, where they have something of value to bring to your organization. And that's how we increase our engagement in our staff. And when we do that, it takes a load off of us. So you may feel like, well, she just gave me 12 things I have to do. And I kind of did. But the reality is, when you start to take that load off, when you start to take a break from that space and say, no, instead I'm going to invest in my staff, when they perform better, you have less work to do. When your students perform better, when they're more engaged, it reduces the work that you have to do to try and keep them caught up, to engage them in that process. And so start thinking about ways that you can do that, that you can be a part of that. So I said to you all that these 12 techniques are valuable, but they're 12 things, and most of us can't do 12 things. And so as you're thinking about our session and all the 12 things that we just talked about, I would love to hear from you in the chat box, or if somebody is feeling like they want to unmute, that they want to share something. I want to hear 1 or 2 things that you say, I'm going to do this with my staff to increase engagement. Because the reality is, if you came to this session and you don't do something afterwards, you just wasted your time. Sorry. And you've got a lot of things to do and you're busy. So you need to pick something you need to do and be reflective about it. Why is that thing going to make a difference for your young people? And so I'd love to hear from you right now. You can type it in the chat. You can unmute if you're feeling brave and want to talk and you go, that's easier for me than writing, but I'd love to hear, what are your things that you're going to do to increase engagement? Leadership development opportunities to staff. Victoria, how are you going to do that? What kinds of leadership development opportunities can you offer your staff?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I would just love to, there's just a couple of site directors that just really stand out as far as what they do with the children. And I can also see them in something a little more administrative. And I was hoping to just expose them to some of the things that I am exposed to with leadership training, and making sure that they get the invites, and just thinking now, just for things like this, do they have, have I given them anything from foundations? No, I haven't, just to put it out there. So I'm like, just making these things available to them so that they can, just explore like a different level of engagement, with the out of school time profession. And it just might propel them, in a different direction.
Yeah. And I will say, Victoria, that works. Like, I will say it works because I'm one of those people who it's worked for. I'm somebody who I got trained how to teach school. That's what my training was in. And then I had a principal who said to me, hey, do you want to run this after school summer program? And I was like, yeah, not that I actually know how to do that. And was given opportunity to do something that I didn't really know how to, and was able to design and grow a program from nothing to hundreds and hundreds of kids every year that came through our doors and that were invested in. So I would encourage you, do it, give them those opportunities, because you don't know who's going to be the one who it works for. Let's see. Deneen is going to work harder at recognizing staff, be a better resource, being present physically. I will give you my recommendation. Put it on your calendar. Say, here's the time that I'm going to make sure that I walk out of my office door and into program spaces to see what's going on. If you don't, it won't happen. You'll book other meetings. Your emails will always have more things for you to do. All of those things. Create that space. Create that time for that. Make sure that you do that. I love the grow and glow wall. Celebration is such a huge part of encouraging engagement in our young people and in our families, celebrating the accomplishments of what we're doing. And so I see a couple of you who are along those lines that you can see and are thinking about those things. a shout out board. So in buildings, you can see the great work that they're doing. It's great. Continue to post on social media so parents can see the good things too. Absolutely. What a way to engage families in that we'd be part of that process. And so I would encourage you all, before we have a few minutes left, I'd be happy to answer any questions, those kinds of things. But I would encourage you to please take a minute or two before you go and reflect, figure out what the thing is you're going to do. If you need to put it on the calendar, if you need to say, this is how I'm going to make sure that this happens, do that thing. Put the social event on the calendar. Whatever it is that needs to happen, make sure that happens. Antonio's got a great example of a social gathering. They do bowling or mini golf or escape rooms. That's pretty impressive, each with a theme, but those things make a difference. So as you think about your current staff and you think about how to prevent engagement, if you're somebody who's looking to address staff acquisition, staff retention, or keep our engaged staff, then join us at BSH. We are going to have another session that's connected to this one. It's called a people-focused approach to staff acquisition and retention. So we would love to see you then. And if you are somebody who's looking for other resources from foundations, please reach out, send me an email, connect with Elizabeth. We would be happy to talk to you about any resources that you may need for your staff as you're thinking about ways to, for example, leadership development, just because we heard that today. But we would love to connect with you more. And if you haven't signed up for Beyond School Hours, you should do that. But I'm still Elizabeth Sunder. So Elizabeth, that's yours.
No, I didn't mean to rush you at the end. Yeah, no, absolutely. I would encourage everybody, if you enjoyed Hillary's presentation today, please come to BSH. Our team does a lot of presentations, but it's 4 days of professional learning, resources for leadership. On February 9th, we have a leadership institute. So if you're really interested in doing like a deeper dive into leadership, that session runs from like 8 to 2:30 on February 9th, in addition to the regular conference. So that's like an add-on. But there's just a lot of opportunities to network with other people, share great ideas. So not only is it a fun time because it's in Orlando, but it is a way to really improve your practice. And that's what we're really hoping. Again, I just want to say thank you to Hillary. This was a fantastic webinar, such a great thing to be able to provide our own expertise from our own people to the webinar attendees. And we really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. This is a crazy time of year, and we really appreciate the fact that you have taken the time this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, to spend with us. If you would please take a minute to fill out our survey, you will also receive a certificate of completion for filling it out. Registration is open for Beyond School Hours. I've made sure that was in the chat. And again, just thank you so much. Look out for our upcoming webinar series. You can always check us out on our website to learn a little bit more or follow us on social media. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one.